You remember the sound not of her voice, but of the moment it disappeared. Not a scream, not a cry, just the absence that followed your silence. That strange hush when you stopped reacting, stopped moving, stopped chasing, and in that stillness, something ancient stirred not in her, but in you, a flicker of a forgotten truth, like staring into a mirror that doesn't reflect a face but a shadow curling inward. She laughed louder, moved faster, sparked fires just to see them dance. But you saw it, didn't you? The way her eyes flicked sideways when the world paused. The tremble in her hand when the music stopped. Not fear of you, fear of stillness itself. Because in stillness, there is no script, no role, no echo, only that unbearable whisper that asks who are you when no one needs you to be anything, and that's when the chaos begins. You noticed it not in her words, but in the space between them. That flickering tension just before she filled the silence. She could not let it breathe. Her hands would move, her eyes would dart, her voice would rise like a flare against the dusk. Because when everything went quiet, when nothing asked anything of her, she stood face to face with the one thing she could not charm, seduce, or silence herself. Not the curated self, not the pleasing self, not even the angry self, but the raw, mute echo of being, and she could not bear it. So she ran, not away from you, but from the moment you stopped running after her. You thought her fury was about you, her coldness, her tests, her provocation, but those were only veils stitched in panic. She does not fear being alone. She fears being still. Stillness is where masks fall of their own weight. In movement, there's distraction. In drama, identity. But in stillness, the house of mirrors goes dark. And without performance, she must ask the question she cannot endure: if I am not wanted, and I am not seen, what remains? She performs so that she never has to find out. When you withdraw without anger, when you simply stop playing the game, she feels it like drowning. Because it is not rejection that wounds her. It is the absence of audience. The stage goes dim. No more lines, no more cues. Just the unlit room of her inner world, where the walls whisper and the ceiling bends low, and the mirrors show not beauty, but blankness, not flaw, not ugliness, but void. She creates chaos so she can feel real again, so she can hear something, anything, over the roar of silence that accuses her more than any voice ever could. You've seen it before, that sudden accusation thrown like a dagger, that outburst spun from nothing, the bait, the trap, the storm, and you wondered why. Why would she provoke the very pain she says she hates? But the truth is crueler than logic. Pain feels alive. Stillness feels like death. And when you stand still, truly still, without flinching, without ego, without punishment, she feels a silence far older than both of you. A silence that strips roles, melts masks, and says, now, speak without your costume. She cannot. The tragedy is not that she lies. It's that she doesn't know what truth would look like without someone else's gaze to shape it. Her reflection is borrowed. Her desires are remembered. Her selfhood is reactive. You do not love her chaos, but you may have fallen for the illusion it sustains, the urgency, the sparkle, the deep well of feeling. But that is the surface of a soul in flight, not rooted, not known, not still. And you, with your silence, are the first threat she cannot control, because you do not scream, you do not chase, you do not mirror her frenzy. You wait, and in that waiting, something collapses inside her. She fears the moment your eyes stop asking questions, when you no longer seek her softness, when you no longer respond to her moods like a loyal actor following script. Because then she must answer something unspeakable. Who am I when no one believes I'm special? Who am I when no one reacts? Stillness is not peaceful to the soul that has built itself on echoes. It is annihilation. She will not tell you this. She cannot. She does not yet know it. She only knows that your stillness unsettles her in ways she cannot name. So she names you Kuku, distant, cruel. She projects the emptiness inward and outward, flailing for sound, for heat, for anything to interrupt the rising chill of the mirror with no face. But you know, you've felt it. The way she changes when you stop flinching, the way her chaos thickens when your soul no longer flares in defense. She tests you not because she wants your rage, but because your calm exposes something she cannot master. A man unmoved is a man who holds the key to her deepest fear, being nothing in the eyes of one who sees everything. Stillness is not the absence of love. It is the demand for a different kind of truth, one that cannot be performed, one that emerges only when all rehearsals end. She cannot love in stillness because love, for her, has always meant motion pursuit, response, validation, crisis. Stillness says, I do not need you to be anything for me. And that is the most terrifying sentence she has never heard. You become the mirror she cannot look into. Not because you reflect her flaws, but because you reflect nothing. And in that nothing, she must face what she has never dared to ask: is there a self beneath all this becoming? And if so, what does it sound like? Does it weep? Does it pray? Does it scream? Or is it horrifyingly silent? The paradox is brutal. She seeks attention, but fears exposure. She longs for love, but drowns in the quiet that precedes it. She dances, performs, provokes hoping to draw you near, then hating you for seeing too deep. She wears desire like a veil over dread, and when you lift it gently, without force, she strikes, not to hurt you, but to cover herself again. You are not her enemy. You are her silence returned. You are the stillness she tried to outrun. You are the unanswered question she buried beneath beauty and tears. And the moment you stop needing her chaos to feel alive, she felt death, but not the kind you think, not the death of romance, not the death of intimacy, the death of illusion, the death of self as performance, the death of the mirror that once told her she was real because someone clapped. You, in your silence, refused to clap. You let the curtain fall, and behind it no script, no applause, just the quiet weight of her own presence, unscripted and unsaved. You did not leave her. You left the theater. You walked out of the story she was trying to live in, and when she followed, she found not you but herself, and she could not bear it, not yet, because the stillness does not affirm. It does not console, it does not applaud, it only watches. And when a woman has spent her life becoming the gaze she receives, the watching becomes unbearable, not because it judges, but because it does not move. And so, she moves again, faster, louder, wilder. She sets another fire, she dances over another ruin, not because she is evil, not because she is cruel, but because in the silence, in the stillness, she fears she does not exist. And you poor soul, you were the first silence that asked her to be real, and she could not. You thought she was seeking closeness, that every message, every touch, every glance meant movement toward truth. But you were wrong. She wasn't moving toward anything, she was running from the stillness chasing behind her. Every moment with you was a motion to escape herself, to stay distracted, to stay alive through noise, through romance, through reaction. And the more you listened without trying to fix her, the more she writhed. Because what she truly fears is not rejection, but recognition, the kind that sees through all her beauty and all her pain, and finds nothing yet formed beneath. She cries because crying gives her shape. She fights because anger gives her meaning. She seduces because desire gives her evidence that she matters. But when all of that falls away, when she is met not with praise or punishment, but a gaze that does not demand anything, she feels herself disappear. Not physically, not emotionally, ontologically. The self that was built on being wanted does not survive the silence of not needing to be anything, and so she dances, not in joy, but in defiance. A ritual to keep the silence away, to keep your gaze reactive. She needs you to need her chaos, because the moment you do not, the moment you neither correct nor collapse, neither run nor retaliate, she sees that the dance was never for you. It was for the mirror, the one that only shows her if you're watching. She cannot enter stillness because stillness is where the questions are. Not the shallow ones, not do you love me, or what are we, but the brutal, bottomless ones. What if I am only who I pretend to be? What if love is not safety, but annihilation? What if no one sees me, because I have never seen myself? And if she stopped moving, stopped reacting, stopped crying, what would remain? There is a kind of despair too quiet to name. The despair of knowing that everything you've done to be loved was a distraction from the terror of being. She feels it when she lies beside you in perfect peace and still cannot breathe. She feels it when you do not chase her mood, when you do not interpret her silence as a summons, when you let her be and she cannot bear it, because the one thing she cannot endure is your refusal to join the dance. You are supposed to perform too, to be wounded, to be angry, to reassure, to fail. You were supposed to orbit her motion like a faithful moon, but you stood still, and in that stillness, you did not abandon her, you abandoned the script. You left the stage, you put down your lines and looked, really looked not at her, but through her, not to expose her, but to wait for the moment she stopped performing long enough to be known. But she panicked, she spun harder, the dance grew wilder, accusations, confessions, tests, all to restart the music, to bring back the rhythm of reaction. She needed you to become chaos again, because your calm was a verdict, not against her, but against the illusion that performance was intimacy, that chaos was connection, that being wanted was the same as being loved. It is not, and you knew that. That is why you did not move, but she cannot know it, not yet, because to know it would mean sitting in the silence long enough to feel everything she's buried beneath motion. The memories she turned into stories, the heartbreak she turned into identity, the hunger she disguised as independence. She doesn't fear you. She fears what she would hear if she stopped talking to you and started listening to herself. And you poor soul, you gave her that space. You didn't push her to grow. You didn't tell her what she should be. You did worse. You made no demands. You let her be. And in that void, she faced the first man who did not want her to dance. And it broke her. Because without the dance, she is still. And in stillness, she does not know who she is. So she blames you, says you are distant, says you are indifferent, says you make her feel invisible. But what she means is you make me see the parts of me I've kept hidden, even from myself. And it terrifies her, not because you judged her, but because you didn't. You simply stood there, with eyes that did not need her to move, to beg, to sparkle. You waited for her truth, and she had none ready. Only echoes, only costumes, only words designed to fill time and silence, to keep the questions at bay. She is not shallow, do not make that mistake. She is deep, unbearably deep, but the deeper the well, the more terrifying the silence at its bottom. And that's what she's avoiding. That's what the dance was always about, not to attract, but to distract, not to control you, but to avoid being confronted by the unmovable truth of who she is when she is no longer watched, desired, or pursued. You were the mirror that did not speak. You were the silence that did not affirm. And in that space, she felt not freedom, but exposure. Her whole life, she believed that if she could just move well enough, beautifully enough, heartbreakingly enough, someone would love her, someone would see her. But you, in your stillness, taught her something unbearable. Love is not in the reaction. Love is not in the chaos. Love is what remains when all performance dies. And that is what she fears, because she has never known what that kind of love would require of her. It would require her to be known, not desired. Known. And to be known, she would have to stop dancing. She would have to sit in the quiet. She would have to hear her own voice. Unfiltered, unchosen, unscripted. And perhaps it would weep. Or worse, perhaps it would be silent. You see, she was never afraid of being hurt. She was afraid of being seen. And you did not hurt her. You saw her, not just the chaos, not just the seduction, not just the rage. You saw the trembling, frantic soul beneath it all. The girl who never felt real unless someone was clapping. The woman who only felt loved when she was adored through a mask. And you refused to clap. You stood in the silence and waited for her to come unmasked. But she wasn't ready, and so she danced harder, and so she said things she didn't mean, and so she pulled you into a storm that had nothing to do with you. Not because she hated you, but because your presence made her absence unbearable. You didn't make her feel small. You made her feel like everything she'd built was hollow. And that is a cruelty she cannot forgive, not yet. Because it's not a cruelty you inflicted. It's a truth she encountered. A truth that said you are more than what you perform, if you dare to find out. But to find out, she'd have to stop. And stopping to her feels like vanishing. So she moves, and the music plays, and the dance begins again. You remember the moment she vanished, not in body, not in voice, but in essence. The body remained. The eyes sparkled still, but something inside her retreated the moment you chose stillness over spectacle. You did not chase, you did not explain, you simply stood, and your stillness was not absence, it was a cathedral, vast, hollow, echoing, and it swallowed her. She had no language for this place, no script, no cues, no music to time her steps. Here, within your unmoving gaze, she was no longer the dancer, no longer the seductress, no longer even the wounded child. She was raw, wordless awareness, and she hated it. Not because you made her feel small, but because you made her feel real, and reality stripped of ornament, of chaos, of narrative was unbearable. You were not supposed to become her silence. You were supposed to be her echo. But you didn't play. You didn't respond the way others had. You did not reach for the crying girl with promises. You did not rescue her from herself. And so she stood, alone in your stillness, and realized the truth: she had never been truly alone with anyone who did not try to fix her. And that, strangely, is what broke her. Because this kind of being alone, not physical solitude, but existential exposure, demands more courage than she has ever known. It demands the destruction of every mask worn for love, for attention, for survival. It demands that she speak, not to be heard, but to exist. It demands that she listen, not to be reassured, but to be changed. She isn't ready, so she retreats, not loudly, not cruelly, just with absence, just with distance, just with shallow conversations about nothing while her eyes avoid yours. terrified of what might break loose if she looks too long. You have become the thing she both desires and cannot tolerate a man who does not move for her, because he sees her. Do you understand what that means? It means you are no longer a part of the play. You are the audience that stopped clapping, the sacred space where her roles fall flat, the cathedral where no echo returns, where no applause softens the void. And in that void, she sees herself not as she wishes to be, not as others adore her, but as she is, and she does not know what to do with that. So she builds noise. She re-enters the world with louder stories, new admirers, new dramas, new mirrors that reflect the version of her she knows how to be. And when she speaks of you, if she speaks of you, she will say, "He was quiet, too quiet." She will say, "He made me feel invisible." She will say, "He didn't make me feel loved." But those are not truths. They are translations, attempts to turn the sacred wound into something manageable. Because the real truth is this: you made her see a life beyond the dance, and she was not ready to leave the stage. Stillness asks for sacrifice. It demands the death of performance. It asks a woman to love without needing to be pursued, to rest without needing to be admired. It asks her to be without a reason. And that is the most terrifying freedom of all, to be unneeded and still be whole. She has never known this kind of love. Most men chase, most men fix, most men burn with a hunger that affirms her existence. You, on the other hand, waited, not coldly, not cruelly, but with a presence so full, so unmoving, that it reflected nothing back unless she chose to be seen. You were the cathedral, the echo chamber, the mirror without distortion, and she could not bear it. She will return to noise now. She will build new stages. She will surround herself with the applause of lesser truths. Not because she does not care, but because caring in silence requires strength she has not yet found. You may see her laugh. You may see her celebrated. You may see her sparkle under lights designed to mimic intimacy. Do not be fooled. That is not wholeness. That is choreography. That is the ancient rhythm of the self afraid to dissolve. You were the stillness that threatened to do just that, to dissolve everything she had created in order to survive. She never hated you. She feared you, and fear wears many masks: anger, distance, confusion, blame. She may never admit it. She may never return. But somewhere inside her, beneath the layers of stories and justifications, she remembers the cathedral. She remembers how you stood without needing, how you saw without judging, how you listened without reaching. And that memory will haunt her, not because it wounded her, but because it revealed her. There is a kind of man whose love does not flatter, does not follow, does not bend. He waits. He stands. He becomes the silence that beckons truth. You are that man. And she was not ready. Not yet, but she will search for you in different faces, in different dances, in different flames. And she will not find you, because what she seeks is not a man, but stillness. And stillness cannot be pursued. It can only be met. It can only be endured. You were not too much. You were not too little. You were simply present in a world that rewards absence. You were still in a love that thrives on movement. You were unshaken in a heart trained to test, to shake, to pull. And in your refusal to move, you offered her the deepest form of recognition, the chance to become, not who she performs to be, but who she truly is beneath it all. She did not take it, but one day, perhaps, she will, and she will remember you not as the man who disappeared, but as the man who stood, The man who built a cathedral where once there was only a stage, the man who asked no questions, gave no answers, and in doing so, became the only question that ever mattered. Not, do you love me, but who are you when no one watches? That question echoes still. It will echo forever. Because there is no louder sound than the silence of being seen and not performing. No deeper wound than realizing you have never known yourself without someone else's eyes to shape you. No greater terror than encountering a man who needs nothing from you and still remains. You were that terror. You were that stillness. You were that cathedral. And until she can kneel there without trembling, she will call it loneliness. She will call it cold. She will call it everything except what it was the first invitation to truth. And so she leaves, but her soul lingers. And perhaps, one day, it will return barefoot, breathless, broken, and enter the cathedral not to be held, but to be hollowed, to be emptied of every mask, to be known without mirror, to be still. At last, there is a silence that does not end when the voices fall away. It deepens, like a winter that never thaws, like a prayer never answered, like a breath held beneath stone. You are not waiting anymore, but the echo remains. And somewhere, she is still dancing, still laughing, still fleeing the question. She walks through crowded rooms, past eager hands and open doors, but the music never quite masks the quiet behind her. The cathedral follows, not as punishment, not as hope, but as truth. One day, the noise will stop, not because she chooses, but because it exhausts her. And in that final hush, when no one claps and no one watches, she will remember the man who did not move, and she will finally ask, was that love, or was that God? But by then, you will be gone, or you will have become the silence itself.